Welcome to episode 9. It's been a while since I've recorded a podcast because I was kind of ahead of myself for a change. So it's good to be back. And if you're watching on YouTube, then you are going to see me do a lot of eye rolling and a lot of quotation marks. If you're listening to the podcast, you're going to hear the word obesity, trigger warning for that word, a lot today. That's because I am going to be talking about World Obesity Day. So I know the word is triggering, but I want you to know, even if you can't see me, that I'm doing a lot of eye rolling and a lot of quotation marks here because, as you know, I do not like that word. So let's get into it. Well, Monday, it's Wednesday now, Monday was World Obesity Day, and if you follow me on social media, you will know I had a lot to say about that. World Obesity Day. First of all, why do we have a day celebrating obesity? I mean, I'm all for celebrating being fat, but that's not what this day is about. The origin story, well, as much as I can tell, the origin story about World Obesity Day is it was started by the World Obesity Federation. And if you're a Trekkie like me, like, federation has very positive connotations, and these people ruined it for me. So I just want to point out right from the start, I'm upset. But the federation, I think it's a UK-based organisation, actually, the federation. There are lots of quote-unquote obesity charities out there. And when I say charities, it's an odd thing, because to me charity means helping people, helping individuals, trying to find a way to make their lives better, to improve their lives in some way, whether it's providing food or clean water or, looking after animals or whatever it is. Charities generally have people or animals aren't people, are they? Well, depends how you look at it, but you know what I mean. They have individuals, communities at heart. That's what they're there for, to serve communities. Obesity charities are not there to serve communities. I mean, they pretend to, obviously, but they don't do anything good for people. So I'm not sure how they can possibly claim that. If you go to worldobesityday.org, I think it's .org or .com or whatever, it's a very fancy website. Well, not that fancy, actually. They could have put more effort into the website. The amount of money they make, you'd think they'd spend a bit more money on the website, but they didn't. They don't need to, because it's a bit of like a... It's not really as I said, it's not really a charity that's helping people. So I doubt that many people access their website. And if you look at it, there's all sorts of fact sheets and this and that, and join our community, and there's a special place for young people, because young fat people are going to go and want to join a World Obesity Federation website, whatever. I have teenagers, that doesn't sound like something they would do, but yes, they claim to be reshaping the story of obesity. I don't know if that's the Federation's website or whether it's the World Obesity Day, but they're linked. Basically, the two are linked together. Reshaping the story. Already that has some red flags, because they have been reshaping the story for a very long time. Whether or not this group existed that far back, I couldn't tell you. Don't know how long it's existed, but there have always been quote-unquote charities, organisations that have been trying to shape, not reshape, shape the story. They created it in the first place, so of course they wish to control the narrative and they wish to control the shape of the story. When you look at the World Obesity Federation, if you look at their website and you go, I didn't spend too much time on it because they're dickheads, but I did spend some time there, and when you look, there are 3 things that they're involved in their mission. Their mission involves 3 things. The first is better food systems. Better food systems, because as we all know, we are fat because of the food we eat, right? You all know that by now. Surely you've been paying attention. You all eat too much and don't exercise enough. I say you, not me. I'm the exception to the rule. But it's all about the junk food that you're eating. The fried food, the processed, the not even processed anymore, it's ultra processed now. It's ultra processed food. That's what it's all about, folks. Such an interesting thing. I mean, there has to be in every story, because they're reshaping the story, remember? So in every story there has to be a villain, and the villain is food. Certain types of food especially. A lot of people benefit from that narrative actually in the food industry, because they charge, there's an entire industry now that's dedicated to quote unquote healthy food. And oftentimes it's more expensive, right? The processed, all the ultra processed stuff is the cheap stuff, which we demonize, and then the healthy, clean food costs 3 times as much. So the food industry is benefiting from this. Don't for one second think they're not. It's just that they're also the villain in the story. They need to be, because every story needs a villain. And of course, fat people are the real villains, but it's fat, greedy people. And the narrative at the moment is to stop shaming and blaming fat people. That's part of reshaping the story. I'll talk about that later. Oh dear, excuse me. I've got a bit of sniffles, and I've got a bit of a cough today, which is not great. But there you go. I didn't even bring my water. I did not prepare. Never mind. So the second thing that they are all about, this federation, second time I cough now, sorry, is improving health systems. Now, this to me is a fucking joke. Improving health systems. Translation, making weight loss financially beneficial to as many people as possible, and penalising and oppressing fat people. That's what they mean by improving health systems. Under no circumstances are they interested in improving access to healthcare for fat people. Quite the opposite. They want to sell us weight loss. So the only health system they're trying to improve is the weight loss component of the health system. They're not doing anything else. And then, of course, my favourites, tackling childhood obesity, because think of the children. Do you remember that? It was, it's definitely something in The Simpsons when, who is it? Maud, I think. Maud Flanders, or one of the Christians always clutches her pearls and says, think of the children. And this is, again, part of every story. You've got your villains. You've got your heroes, your champions who are trying to improve the health system. And then there are like the sort of victims in the story, the people we're supposed to most feel sorry about. And that's usually children, animals, or like vulnerable people. So they've picked children. They are moving in on animals, to be fair, but there's not as much money to be made. But yes, it's children. Tackling childhood obesity. All they've managed to do in the last 30 years is make more children fat. And that's because they're putting them on diets younger and younger and younger. They have not succeeded in tackling anything. They're just making it worse. But, like I said, every story needs a victim, and children are the victims. And of course, their fat parents, once again, are the villains. The fat parents that buy them ultra-processed foods and junk food and convenience food, because of course that's what makes them fat. For those of you who don't get my sarcastic ways, I'm being super sarcastic right now. I do not believe any of that shit. Okay? Children do not need tackling. We are not at war. We are not in a crisis or an epidemic. We need to leave children the fuck alone. There's nothing wrong with processed food. There's nothing wrong with ultra processed food. It's not a real thing, but if it was, there'd still be nothing wrong with it. You're not fat because of what you eat. That is ridiculous. The rest is all bullshit too. Sometimes I deal with things that piss me off with sarcasm. So anyway, the World Obesity Federation, absolute cocks. I wanted to look up who their corporate sponsors are, because they do have corporate sponsors, but there's a big thing in the UK at the moment, and you can tell from their website that they're being very careful about who sponsors them and admitting who sponsored them, so much so that it's coming soon to the website, but it's not there anymore. And that's because this organisation is a charity in the UK, and the UK has very strong rules. And recently the ABPI, which is the pharmaceutical industry's kind of regulatory body have had some very strong words with Novo Nordisk and have expelled them basically for 2 years, or suspended them for 2 years, because of their dodgy dealings. And so you can tell this website and this organisation are now like, "Ooh, we can't be seen to be working with them." So Novo is not sponsoring World Obesity Day this year, in 2024, or didn't, because it's gone now, I forget. But Lilly is, Eli Lilly, who are the other weight loss drug manufacturers, and there's a reason Novo isn't, and that's all to do with the drama that's gone. But lots of other drug companies have sponsored it, and they have no problems accepting money from drug companies. They just won't accept money from the food industry, because they're the villains. So they can't take money from the food industry, but the drug companies are fine. What a joke. So yeah, let's just say World Obesity Day really pisses me off, and really boils my piss, yes. And so, as you know, or if you follow me on socials, as you know, I sort of came up with my version of it's not an antidote, that's not the word I'm looking for, like a counter protest almost, which was Unshrinkable. I really, really love the name Unshrinkable. I also love the pictures. I don't know if you've seen my website yet, and if you've had a look, please do go to fat.co.uk//unshrinkable, and there's the pictures that I created with fat superheroes, which I'm just totally and utterly in love with. So yeah, if nothing else, the imagery alone makes me so happy. But yeah, we are unshrinkable, folks. I genuinely believe that. And I'm not saying that just because it's wishful thinking. I'm not saying that because, it just helps my narrative. I'm saying that because I've done a shit ton of research into this. And I'm convinced that we are unshrinkable. And there's lots of reasons why I'm convinced that we're unshrinkable. Our bodies are not meant to shrink. We know this because over the last 100 years, we've been doing study after study looking at intentional weight loss. And so far, they've all been unsuccessful. And I suppose it depends on how you measure success. Some people have managed to lose weight in the first 3 months, 6 months, a year, of course. In fact, most people lose weight in the first few months. How much weight is different? Once upon a time, people were like, yeah, let's try and get to 20%. They soon realised that was almost impossible. Then they went to 10% and they realised that wasn't possible. Then they went to 5%, they realised that wasn't possible. Nowadays, 5% is the goal for many of these papers. Oftentimes the results are more like 2 to 3%. So if you look at, for example, the semaglutide trials, the Wegovy trials, they had two arms, right? So one was the Wegovy arm, but the other one was just the diet and exercise arm. So that was just people who were on a 500 calorie deficit plus 150 minutes of exercise a day, plus counselling, weight loss, weight management type stuff, right? So speaking to a weight management professional on a regular basis. Everybody in the trial was doing this, was following this for a year. So, forget the Wegovy arm, look at the control arm that were just doing this. They were getting placebo injections, so they would have thought that they were on, the path to weight loss. They thought they were taking a weight loss drug. Perfect conditions for weight loss, if you ask me, according to every kind of health organization out there. They'll tell you 500 calorie deficit plus regular exercise plus weight management. That's the ideal conditions for weight loss. Yeah, look at how successful they were. They managed about 3%, 4%, and they started regaining almost straight away. So it doesn't work. And I mean, that's not the only study. Every study shows that 5%. I mean, yes, if you go for bariatric surgery, if you go for these new weight loss drugs, it's more than 5%, but it's not really impressive. All that hard work for a year. Can you imagine starving yourself for a year, exercising for a year and managing 3% of your body weight? I mean, that's, as some people point out, I could do a really big shit and manage a few pounds. So, yeah. My point is, it's not easy, and it's not really possible. And even if you do manage to lose the weight, you manage to gain it again. You will start regaining. And again, this is even if you've had bariatric surgery, even if you're taking the weight loss drugs, you will start regaining weight. You reach the peak of weight loss, which is called the nadir, however you want to say it, it's spelled NADIR. When you hit that peak, you will start regaining again. And people are like, yeah, but then you go into weight and then you go into maintenance, the maintenance phase. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. I mean, there's a podcast dedicated to this. There is no such thing as a maintenance phase. You start regaining and you keep on regaining, and the studies show that almost everyone will have regained all the weight back within 5 years, and in fact up to 2/3 of people will end up heavier within those 5 years. So it's just unsustainable. It doesn't work. We are unshrinkable. But even if you were one of the, like, I don't know, 2-3% or whatever the percentage are that was able to lose weight and maintain it, or even if you're like, okay, it's going to be unsustainable, but at least I'll have a year of it or 2 years of it, or if I do bariatric surgery, maybe even a few years of being smaller. Not necessarily small, not necessarily thin, because don't forget, a lot of people will lose 10% of their body weight, 15% of their body weight, whatever it is, and still be in the obese category. Again, big quotation marks there and eye rolls. Obese category. So you're not necessarily going to become thin, but you'll become thinner. So you might say, all right, well, okay, it's not sustainable forever, but it's sustainable for some time, and surely that's good for you. Well, no, not really. I'm yet to find a paper that shows that weight loss is effective in improving long-term health outcomes. I can find tons of papers that show, oh, your blood pressure will come down a little bit, or your liver function will come down a little bit, or your cholesterol will come down. I mean, you know, sure. In the first year, no problem. I believe you. Long term, does it have any real life impact? No, it doesn't. I mean, find me a study that shows it does, and you won't. I've looked for them. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, cancer, you name it. Cancer recurrence, anything you could possibly imagine. Arthritis of the hip and of the knee. Any condition. Idiopathic intracranial hypertension. I'm just gonna go off on one now. Lipedema. Any musculoskeletal condition. Diabetes. Pre-diabetes. 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 Listen, there is no evidence that weight loss is going to impact outcomes in the long term. I'm not talking about measures of success, because we can measure the success of weight loss in many ways. Most studies measure success by measuring how much weight people lose. Some studies will go and measure success by looking at things like I said, blood pressure, cholesterol, liver function, whatever. They'll use some other marker. But when you're actually looking at health outcomes, in other words, is this going to stop me from getting sick or dying or getting sicker, whatever, then no, there's just no evidence. It doesn't exist. So even if you did lose a ton of weight, it wouldn't improve your health. Now, it would improve the way that people treated you. There's no doubt about that, until you started regaining weight again, and then you're back to, square one. Maybe you take 2 steps forward and 4 steps back, because sometimes losing the approval and losing the goodwill and losing the, the kind of acceptance into society, sometimes that's harder than not having it in the first place. But that's a conversation for another time. It's unsustainable, it's ineffective, and also, by the way, folks, it's highly dangerous. Did you know that intentional weight loss has tons of risks associated with it? I can talk about short-term side effects, I could talk about short-term risks, long-term risks, psychological ones, physical ones. We could talk about weight cycling, the impact on the body. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Just if you want to know the impact of reducing your calorie intake, look no further than the Minnesota semi-starvation experiment. This is it's not quite 100, it was 80 years old. Have we not learned anything? The Minnesota semi-starvation experiment showed that people who dropped their calories by a half for a period of 6 months became really unwell. Not only do they lose a ton of weight, because in the first 6 months people, almost always do, but they were deeply unhappy. They had several physiological problems. I'm talking like resting heart rate, metabolic rate, all sorts of things went down. Mood, cognition, everything was impacted. They became obsessed and preoccupied with food, which we know happens every time you restrict yourself. It becomes an obsession. Restrict yourself for a week, you're okay. 6 weeks, maybe you can handle it, but you go longer than that and you become obsessed with food. Food obsession is definitely a risk for eating disorders. So is dieting, by the way. any form of dieting, risk for an eating disorder, has a massive impact on your serotonin levels, on your dopamine levels, on your oxytocin levels, any of your happy chemicals in your brain. So you're going to be low. It actually impacts your memory and your concentration, especially low carbs. Massively impact your memory and concentration. You become slower, less effective. When you go to work, I mean, how many of us have been to work on a diet? I have. I worked through fucking COVID on a strict calorie controlled diet. And it was just like, it was so hard to just do my job. It was mentally and physically exhausting. I was losing a ton of weight. Everyone was like, oh, it's amazing. But it didn't stop kind of the impact on my well-being. And it drove me to despair, literally, into a bout of severe depression. And then long-term, weight cycling. My goodness. There are studies now that are showing that the long-term consequences of intentional weight loss are far worse than the short-term benefits. Come on now, folks. It's unsustainable for almost everyone. It is ineffective when it comes to our health, and it is harmful. And last but not least, I want to point out that it is really unfair and unjust. For lots of reasons. But the main one being that fat people are being punished for being fat, as if we have some control over this. As if we made ourselves fat. Because that's what the world believes, right? That's what the World Obesity Federation believes. It's all about the food, and some will say the lack of exercise, but mainly the food. They think we're lazy and we lack willpower, and we're just lesser beings, lesser mortals, if you will. And so they blame us, and then they punish us. They say, you can't have this until you lose weight. You can't have this operation. You can't have this medication. You can't have this investigation. That's completely and utterly unfair. We're being blamed for something that isn't our fault. We're unshrinkable. That's what we are. We are unshrinkable. Our bodies are not designed to shrink. Every time you try to shrink your body, you pay a price. And those of us who have tried to shrink our bodies regularly, like myself, have paid that price over and over and over again. And there's nothing we can do about that. It's in the past, it's done, we can't reverse it. But there's something massively liberating about recognizing that you are unshrinkable. Once you recognize that you are unshrinkable, you begin to take up space. Space that you didn't think you had the right to take up until that moment. When you're blaming yourself, when you're thinking to yourself, if only I was smaller, this wouldn't have happened to me if I wasn't as big. I wouldn't have got this diagnosis. I would be able to move better. I would be more flexible. I don't know, whatever you're telling yourself, these stories you're telling yourself. If only I was smaller, if only I could shrink, if only I wasn't this big in the first place, then it's really difficult to take up space. It's very difficult to take up space in life in general, and definitely in the medical consultation, in your healthcare journey. And that's not fair. That's just not fair. I don't know what else to say. It sucks. So I came up with this course, Unshrinkable. It came almost like overnight. Honestly, I was like, it was prior to the full moon. I'm trying to think. It was the end of Aquarius season, beginning of Pisces season. I don't know what happened. I was in a good place. I was just thinking. I was out on a dog walk. It started when I was out on a dog walk, and the word came to me first, unshrinkable. And then boom, it was like this course presented itself to me. It was like I had it all. I had to come home, I had to write it down really, really quickly so I didn't forget. I had every single thing planned out. I went and I started I even had in my mind a vision of what I wanted, the kind of the image, the landing page or whatever you want to call it. I'm not good with all this technical stuff, but I had an idea what I wanted to look like. Unapologetically fat people in superhero costumes. I don't know why, but just I just really liked this idea. So that's the story. That's the story of World Obesity Day, and that's the story of Unshrinkable, and that's the story of how it's my way of standing up to these corporate monstrosities who are trying to ruin our lives. You know, I'm not naive. I don't think that I can change the world. Certainly not, overnight. But I can try and help people to feel better about themselves and to take up space. And I think, when you go on a course like this, yes, it's primarily geared towards health, because that's where I operate. That's where I'm comfortable. That's the lane that I choose to stay in. But as I said, when you begin to acknowledge and accept that you are unshrinkable, it changes the way you see yourself and the way you behave and the way you operate. Everywhere, in the workplace, at home, with your friends, with your family. When you really believe in your heart that you're unshrinkable, this course is going to give you resources. Some of you need the evidence. You need to see, okay, some of you are thinking, but I think I'm the exception. Like a lot of people will say to me, yeah, okay, fine, what you're saying is fine, but what about if you're 600 pounds? And they love 600 pounds, and you all know why. 600 pounds is because of some stupid TV show program. So they'll all come up with this one number, not 575, not 615, 600 pounds. What about if you're 600 pounds? They want an exception. They want me to say, well, these people are shrinkable. I'm not doing that. I am not doing that. I am not making exceptions for people. I don't want you to do that either. I don't want you to see yourself as the exception to the rule. And some people need the evidence for that. Some people need to, to be presented with the facts. And I'm going to give you facts, lots of facts. Don't worry about that. But it's more than just facts. It's also, it's also lived experience, and it's also, I don't know, my take on things, I guess. So yeah, if you wanna join, you can still sign up, I believe. I think you've got. I'm trying to think when this comes out. This is episode 9. I'm doing maths. I think you've got a week and a half to book. I might be wrong. But I hope to see some of you there. Thank you all for listening. I hope that you did something to celebrate, to stick your 2 fingers up at the World Obesity Day, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. I don't know if it's long or short or the right amount of time, but I think I've said everything I came to say. So I'll see you next week, where I will be talking about hang on, let me turn the page, because I have it all planned, you see. Sometimes I just write everything down. Oh, I will be yes, I will be talking all about doctors, and it's not what you think it is. It's not what you think it is. So definitely tune in. See you then.